So it's been quite a week, huh? So I've actually been living in a hotel because we had problems with our house. But the upside is we now have a television, which we don't have at home, so I get to watch the news. So it's been quite a week, right? So I'm unprepared today. Well, I don't have a slideshow, so I apologize for everyone. But all of my plans got sort of moved aside because everything seems so crazy right now. True or not true? So, the topic of today's sermon is back to basics. So when everything is confusing, when things are confusing for ourselves in our lives, when things are confusing in the world, when things are confusing in the church, when things are confusing, it's important to sort of gather our thoughts and come back to basic things, right? Now, in the divine principle, right, what is like the most basic teaching about the kingdom of heaven? This is Charles's favorite sermon. What is the basic teaching? There's a clue over there in the slide.
Four-position foundation.
Four-position foundation, right? So it says the kingdom of heaven, right? Kingdom of heaven, the divine principle talks about individual four-position foundation, family four-position foundation, and a worldwide four-position foundation, right? That's very simple instructions, right? Now, it's very basic instructions, very general instructions, but when it comes to it's not very specific about specific things in our specific life, right? It's just very general. So the question is, how do we understand specifics, right? If we can understand, if we can get the general stuff, but when it comes to specific stuff, we can't necessarily find exact guidance for the exact problems in our lives. That's not in the Bible, and it's not in the divine principle. It's general, and we have to figure out, how do we live our daily lives? How do we make choices? How do we decide whether to get married? Where to go to school? How to treat our neighbors? How to do everything? So when I first joined the church, and I don't know if or True Father's words, Reverend Sung Hyun Moon, if you don't know who I'm referring to. I think it was the second time I ever met him, and this was in Boston. It was in New York. We were fundraising, and we had a really bad day. All our roses froze, and Thanksgiving or something like that, and we had to throw everything away. And we arrived at midnight to the center, and they're like, "We're going to New York. We're going to go to a Sunday service." So we all jumped into the vans with our, the clothes that we had just been using from fundraising, slept in the van during the night as we drove to New York, and we woke up in the morning, and I remember clearly, like being so excited to meet Reverend Moon and to listen to him. And so, he talked for hours and hours and hours. Like, we'd be Sunday's pledge service started at 5 o'clock on Sunday mornings and often went till 10:30, 11:30, and people would fall asleep. And I remember clearly at one point, and this is when I had just joined the church, so I was still kind of unsure, who Reverend Moon was, and I was still kind of questioning a lot of things. One of the things that he said was, fallen man has three problems. And it said, he doesn't know how to eat, doesn't know how to sleep, and doesn't know how to get along with each other. And I was like, that's really insightful. Like, the Pope never said that. So that was really, for me, I was like, wow, that's a very, for a preacher to come and say it, for a religious leader to say, you don't know how to eat, you don't know how to sleep, you don't know how to get along. It's really fundamental, right? We all know that we don't know how to do these things. We're all struggling with them all the time. But we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to face it, that we really don't even know how to live one day of our lives correctly. We are unsure about, everything, really, if we're really honest with each other. So the question is, how do we become honest with each other? How do we get along? How do we learn what is the right way to live, right? So for example, in the 10 Commandments it says, love God, right? Love God more than everyone. It says, respect your parents, right? It says, don't kill people, right? Don't steal people. Don't steal things. Don't commit adultery, right? Basic stuff, right? Simple basic stuff. But actually, there are parts in the Bible where actually God commands the Jews to kill the Canaanites, right? When they enter Canaan, do you guys know when the wall falls, it actually commands, kill everyone, kill everything, even kill like the animals. Don't take anything, right? That's not one of the 10 Commandments, right? Respect your parents. Respect your parents. So what does God tell Abraham and Abraham to do? Abraham basically runs away from his parents and steals the gods and takes the property and totally dishes their parents. So, that's the interesting commandment where we have different points of view, right? Or even Jesus says, if you love your parents more than you love God, you are not worthy of me, etc., etc. So, what exactly does that mean, respect your parents? How does that work on a daily basis? What if your parents are wrong, So what are the specifics? What are the specifics about this, right? When we joined the church, many of us were forced to actually abandon our families because our families were so against us becoming members of the Unification Church. So that's disrespecting your parents, or are you respecting them? So like all these little details become a problem, right? When we get to the specific, it becomes a problem. So in Christianity, it says, love your neighbor as yourself. So what does that mean? What does that mean to love your neighbor as yourself? That's when you get to specifics, then that's difficult, right? Because like my dogs bark and my neighbors get mad at me, and I'm like mad at them. You're so unforgiving. So like, should you give everything away? Should you keep the things that you need? Should you give money to people as if they're begging for food? Like, what is the right way to live? We often don't know how to make judgment calls about little things, right? So, like who to vote for, what political party to support, who's wrong and who's right. We have different opinions, right? We have different opinions, and which one is right? Even in the Unification Church, we have people who have extremely different opinions about the same thing. So we perceive things differently, right? For example, when my kids were really little, I would serve them sometimes pasta, sometimes mashed potatoes, sometimes rice, and sometimes bread. Well, I had one kid who didn't like bread. Keisha was like, ew, bread, like warm bread. Who doesn't like warm bread? She didn't like warm bread. I had one kid who didn't like mashed potatoes. Like, who doesn't like mashed potatoes? Mashed potatoes is like the best comfort food, right? Keanu doesn't like mashed potatoes. He's like, the texture. And then I have one kid who pretty much doesn't like anything, but basically refused to eat rice. Still does not eat rice. So there was only one common food that they all liked, one common carb, and that was pasta. Pasta was the unifying factor in my family. I could always feed them pasta. So is the person who doesn't like rice wrong?
No.
Yes. So judgmental. So is Keanu wrong because he doesn't like mashed potatoes? He still doesn't like mashed potatoes.
Yes, that's wrong.
That's wrong, right? So obviously we perceive things very differently, right? We physically perceive things differently. Like, what's your favorite color, Anna? Green. Daniel, what's your favorite color? Who's right and who's wrong? Right? You like different things. We like different things. We perceive different things, right? Different things are perceived differently. Now, for example, if you're in a room, right? If we were in a room and we're all standing around an object, let's say this object was a square, right? It was like a three-dimensional square, a cube, all right? So if everyone's standing in different perception in a different part of the room, and we say, look at this cube, like, what do you see? Like, one person's going to be like, it's a square. One person's going to be like, that's a diamond. So just based on the position that you are in the room, you're going to perceive something differently. What if you're blind? They're like, there's nothing there. It's empty, or you like go and touch it, right? So our ability to perceive is not only different in terms of what we have, what we can, how our eyes see, how we taste things, everything. Our perspectives are different, right? Now, if you have an invisible thing in the center of the room and you're like, okay, so this is God right there, so what do you see, right? According to the divine principle, once after the fall of man, we actually were cut off from our ability to really perceive the invisible God. We actually have the ability to perceive the invisible God, but that was cut somehow. And so we all have, different ways. If you talk to brothers and sisters and you say, oh, well, what's your experience with God? And somebody will say like, I've never experienced God, or some people will be like, I feel God in the wind, And some people are like, I feel God when I read this book, And so we actually perceive this invisible being, and some people don't perceive it at all, right? Some people don't see anything in the middle of the room. So it's a big problem, right? It's a big problem when you really get down to the specifics. Because you have, whether, if we could even all agree that there is something in the room, that would be a start. But we don't even agree on that, right? We don't even agree like, well, there is no God, or God is good, or God is... So once we even agree, oh, there is a God, right? Then we get to the details of like, well, what is this God like? And what are the details about this God? And then we run into different perceptions, right? Different understandings, and then we run into potential problems, right? Potential divisions between people based on our understanding of things. So it's complicated, right? It's complicated, and it becomes more complicated when we're dealing with reality. Okay, so here we go. So how do we figure things out? How can we actually, one of our favorite words in the Unification Church is unity, right? How do we create this elusive unity? And what exactly is unity? We don't really we all have different understandings of what that means. In the early days, unity, or there's certain circles in our Unification Church where unity means doing exactly word for word what your central figure tells you, right? So if you're fundraising and your central figure says, okay, you're going to get to this area and I want you to turn right, turn right there, and then you get to that area and you're like, you turn left, right? There was a time where that was considered a sin in our church, like, you must absolutely obey, So these little, but the person might have ended up going left and doing really great, making tons of money, and so it's like, what exactly is the right way? Like, for example, give you another example. Like, when we were fundraising, it was not a good thing to be dominated by sleep, right? Have you heard of this term? Fundraisers. Sorry, this is early time in the church, right? Don't be dominated by sleep. You have to fundraise, don't fall asleep while you're fundraising. Don't fall asleep while you're listening to lectures. Don't, have control over your mind and body. So falling asleep while you were fundraising was kind of considered like a no-no. But I was a professional at that. There was one time that I actually went to a bathroom and I had my product and I left it outside. I left it in this, sitting on the sink, because the bathroom stall was really small. I went to the bathroom and I fell asleep. I was going to the bathroom. And I actually was woken up because these ladies were like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And I had wind chimes and like, ding, 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 ding. And I made a sale while I was sleeping. Okay, so I was like, this is really interesting. I fell asleep during my run. I'm not supposed to do that. But I actually crushed out. And after that, I made tons of money. I crushed out by falling asleep in the middle of my run. So I questioned that, is it really that bad to fall asleep during a run? So just little details, right? Little details. Okay, so how do we decide what is right or wrong? When it comes to specific things, like when it comes to, I can't think of anything right now. Okay, for our lives. Like, a lot of you guys are in transition periods in your life, right? You're teenagers and you're headed towards being grown-ups. And you're in this position of having to make decisions about your life. And it's actually a difficult place to be. Like, it's actually harder to be in a place of not knowing what you're supposed to do than of not liking what you're supposed to do. Like, oh, I'm supposed to do that, I don't want to do that. It's actually an easier place to be, to struggle with not wanting to do what you're supposed to do than actually not knowing what you're supposed to do, right? Is that true or not true? Maybe not. Yeah, that's my opinion. It can be really disconcerting to actually be unsure of what your mission is, to be unsure of what the specifics are. So how do we figure out the specific? How does each one of us figure out our own specific mission? Like, each one of us has a place. Each one of us has a purpose. Each one of us has something that is a challenge for us to overcome. But it's hard for us to really know, because if we read the divine principle will give us general stuff, but it won't give you specific things about your life or where you're at that time. It might be like, should I go to this university or that university? You may not get an answer to your prayer. It can be confusing. So how do we deal with that? How do we deal with figuring out the basics, the basic direction for our life? So here's the answer. Listen clearly. I'll solve all the problems right now. So pray and study. Okay, if we study without praying, we can perceive things incorrectly. Like, our understandings, our perceptions, our assumptions are tainted by our experience, are tainted by our cultural backgrounds, are tainted by, things that may have happened to us that were not great or that were great. So we make assumptions about words, like the word responsibility. It's a good one. You can just make ooh, responsibility. But what does that mean, right? What does that mean? So we need to really pray and study to understand what words actually mean and what God's intention is for those words for us. So just reading and reading and reading, even though we read, we may not understand. We may not understand God's point of view about things. So we need to seek to understand God's point of view. We must be prayerful. The next one is we need to be humble. We need to be humble. It's important to recognize, to understand that perhaps our perception is flawed. Or perhaps our perception is blatantly incorrect. Or perhaps our perception is partially incorrect. Or perhaps the intention or the feeling behind our assumptions are not necessarily true. They're just based on past experiences. For example, I have a dog who was kind of abused when she was a puppy. And so she's mental. She's like afraid of everything. She's like, a person, oh my God, an old lady with a stroller. Ah! She barks like crazy, and she's terrified of things that are not actually scary. So we may also have assumptions or be afraid of things or think positively or negatively of things based on experiences that we've had in the past. And they may actually be not necessarily the way things really are. Like, that old lady and that baby in the stroller are not going to hurt my dog. She thinks that they will. Like, she's really afraid. Okay? Now, also, for example, if we study the divine principle, we see that there are different time periods in God's providence, and different things are required from His chosen people during those time periods. So we always have to be humble. For example, there's a story of when Reverend Moon was in prison, and there was this incredibly faithful woman who refused to say that she didn't believe in God. right? And she was supposed to be a very important person in the providence. And Reverend Moon basically sent her a message and said, deny your faith, right? It says, pray about this, okay? I'm not telling you guys to deny your faith, but I'm just saying, at that time, that was what was required of her. And actually, that was the hardest thing for her. Like, for her to deny her faith and was more difficult than to die for her faith at that time in her life. But at that time, that was required of her by our understanding of the providence. Our understanding of the providence at that time, that woman was supposed to reject God and be like, I don't believe in God, and get out of prison and then do God's will. That was like her mission at the time. She didn't do it, and she ended up getting killed, and that apparently, from the point of view of our church, was a huge failure in the providence. So we have to constantly be questioning, our understanding, and not only our understanding, but we need to be constantly trying to understand what we have to be humble to recognize that the providence, different things may be required of us at different times in the providence, and we should always be vigilant, and we should always be humble. And for example, another little thing is, in the Bible, you guys heard of the Bible? Okay, there's a story of Moses. Does anyone know the story of Moses?
It's a long story.
Okay. Actually, Moses at one point meets something called the burning bush. Has anyone heard that story? Okay, so Keisha, how does Moses approach the burning bush?
Goes on a mountain. And he prays for like 4 days. 40 days. Takes off his shoes.
Takes off his shoes. That's step one. He's required to take off his shoes, and then what is he required to do? Nope. Nope. He's actually required to lay on his stomach. He's not allowed to approach the burning bush. He has to take off his shoes, and then he has to lay face down on his stomach. He can't look at it directly. And that's the way he's required to approach this expression of God. And of course, I'm not going to say to you guys, all right, pray laying down with your head down. But from a point of view of our spirits and our hearts, at points in our life, we should completely be humble. We should offer everything up, and be like, these are my, this is what I believe. Like, tell me what is right. Question, not question everything as in like, you don't exist, God, but really like humbly place yourself at the foot of God and be like, teach me, explain to me, challenge me. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. Tell me what I should do. The next one is listen. Listen. So if we can accept that perhaps our perceptions are either flawed or are not necessarily always correct, then we should assume that other people's perceptions are also different from ours, right? So it's a very important thing. That's a very simple thing, but it's a very important thing to do, is to recognize that other people perceive things differently, that other people make different assumptions than us. And without understanding their assumptions, and without understanding their point of view, and without understanding their perception of things, your arguments are just going to go on. They're never going to be resolved, because you might be arguing about different things. So it's very important to sit down and really try to understand what another person's assumptions are, what another person's perceptions are, because their definition of the word God may be very different from your definition from the word God, and so you're arguing about different things. So you have to try to define what you're talking about. What you're talking about. The end. Just to cap it all, it's pray and study, be humble in front of God and in front of other people, and listen. Ta-da. Okay, great. All right. Dearest Heavenly Father and true parents, Heavenly Father, you give us instructions, but often many of the decisions that we have to make, you give to us. We have to figure things out, and there's still a lot of things to figure out. There's still really basic stuff that we don't understand. There's still so many misunderstandings within ourselves and amongst each other. So Heavenly Father, we would like to humbly request for your guidance. Heavenly Father, we would like to ask you to teach us as individuals and as a community and as a nation how to live properly, what your hopes are, what your expectations for us are, and what your specific goals are for each one of us. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your guidance and for your patience and for your commitment to this ideal of love that you have and of happiness. Heavenly Father, we pray for your guidance. For this prayer in the name of Catherine Wright and as a blessed central family.